Yeah.
I said,
Is that five?
we're the only two originals here. Yeah.
What's the matter?
I said, him and I are the only two originals here.
Yeah.
New faces, that's good.
All right, we are recording, Madam Chair, if you want to get started.
Yeah, I'll call the meeting to order. Is that the right one?
Oh, I forgot.
You want to do the roll call, Angie?
So got it, right? Did you get it?
So we've got all five members are in attendance today, so we can skip the roll call and move on to that.
You can just write them.
Okay.
Then we-
Is she a little green too?
Yes.
Okay. It's not
Yeah,
just
it's
me.
good.
Yeah.
Judged and quizzed on this today.
Okay, we're all here. We got that much.
So we need.
So
to
the
have
next item would be
approve- yeah, go
approval
ahead.
of the agenda. So if the board doesn't have any objections, then I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Marlene and seconded by Roger to approve the agenda.
Very good.
Call the question?
Call the question?
Yeah,
Is that
say,
what I said?
everybody in favor?
Everybody in favor?
Yes.
Don't we have a discussions first?
Oh, yeah, discussion. You want any
We should.
discussion on the agenda? Sorry. That's right.
I'm just saying, we can usually have a discussion and then, so. No discussion, I just,
Ed, I really needed the little tip sheet here.
We'll work through
You'll
it.
just coach me
We'll
through it.
work through it.
You should talk with Roger. He's done this once before.
If you want to defer,
Any discussion on the agenda?
No?
the most.
Having none, then, everybody in favor?
Aye.
Everybody opposed? Anybody opposed?
Now, won't she call the roll on this?
we don't have to do roll call.
Oh, okay, however you want to work it.
Yeah.
Motion carried.
Okay, next item is a public hearing. We don't have any public hearings today. And then the next section of the agenda is public comments. So, anybody, Brianna, any comments? No public comments.
No public comment.
Next item is correspondence. And we've not received any correspondence.
Any correspondence? Okay.
Do you want to write them down?
No, I will.
Okay.
All right.
Next item is approval of the minutes, and I included in the packet for the board, the minutes from the June 12th, 2018 meeting. So I'm assuming everybody had a chance to look those over.
There is a correction that I want to make. If we can go a little further down. And at the last meeting, when we talked about me not or terminating my contract, effective, I think was it a little further up, in end of September,
30th?
which we can talk about that. Where it says that, Bradford suggested that the county's Brownfield consultant can be used. I just want to clarify that was for one project where I could have conflict of interest. That's the North Channel, in presenting the invoices or the eligible invoices for eligible activities that then the BRA could have the county's Brownfield consultant provide you with, recommendations, whatever. It wasn't about, my comment was not about, in general, having not wanting to have the county's Brownfield consultant. It was just about that project where.
And actually, that's probably going to be a moot point because we
Exactly.
issued the request for qualifications, and by the time those invoices are submitted, we'll have a consultant on board, so they'll be able to
Yeah.
help with that review at that point, so. Without objection, we can, I guess, clarify the minutes for that. So I don't know if there's any other questions on the minutes?
I believe so.
So Madam Chair, if you want to call the question to approve the minutes as amended?
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion.
So Roger
Any
and
discussion?
Jeff.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody
Okay.
opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda are the financial reports, and those were also included in the agenda. If you look on your screen, you can see the balance sheet as of September 30th. Shows cash of about 36,000, and then a few little prepaid expenses. The tax capture payable, the 17,457, is the amount of taxes that the Brownfield Authority has captured from our existing Brownfield plans, but have not been paid out yet to the developer or private developer or the city as the public developer. So those, we approved expenses at the last meeting for the public developer. There'll be some expenses that we're gonna approve here coming up for the private developer, and then once that's all been approved, then I'll distribute those funds according to the reimbursement and development agreements that govern those authorities. So that's why that shows as a liability. When we capture the taxes, it doesn't show as revenue because we're just capturing them on behalf of others. And that shows our fund balance of about $15,000, which is actually, you can think of that as the Brownfield Authority's working capital. If you look down at the next report, it's the revenue and expenditure report, and we really haven't had any revenue expenditures for this fiscal year because we haven't had any administration fees paid out yet. We haven't had any plans that we've gotten a developer to pay us for reviews. So there's no revenue from that perspective. And on the expense side, I know T, as the consultant, has some invoices that he hasn't submitted yet. So you'll probably see those on the next agenda. That those will get paid out per our standard thing, but so far, nothing's been submitted. So since June or July 1, we haven't had any revenue or expenses for the Brownfield Authority. That doesn't mean we haven't been doing things, we just haven't had to incur any expenses. Are there any questions on the financial reports?
No, yes.
So we probably
This should be.
need a motion to accept the financials.
Can I get a motion to accept the financials as presented?
I'll make the motion we accept as read.
Second.
Yeah,
Jeff.
pick it up. There you go, all right.
Any discussion? And everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, we don't have any old business. And then number 10, the agenda item in new business is approval of the reimbursement of South Washington area eligible expenses. And these are specifically for the River Park unit, which is the one that's on the river. It has nothing to do with the south, or with the North Channel Outlet part of the project. It's just for the River Park LLC. And we did receive 2 requests for reimbursement for the retaining wall, which is a big part of it, and then some of the project parts that had to do with the building, which were the site grading and balancing, brownfield plan expenses, and interior demolition. These invoices get submitted. We use our brownfield consultant to review them. I also take a look at them. Not all of the expenses that do get submitted by the developer are necessarily eligible for expense, and that may be because, one, they simply don't qualify, and also the fact that they may not be broken out in enough detail on the invoice, or they might be included in an invoice. So we sort through those and make a determination as to which of those expenses are eligible under the previously approved brownfield plan and the Act 381 work plan. This is the same process that we went through at the last meeting for the city's expenses related to our infrastructure. Again, those were submitted to the developer or to the consultant, and he went through them and then made a determination as to what was to be approved. So we've done that, and I included in your packet some of the details of that. Keep in mind, I actually have the invoices that back up the summary tables that I presented to you. We don't typically include those in the packet.
No.
But we've determined that there's $383,000 and change eligible for reimbursement for the retaining wall, and about $45,000 eligible for reimbursement for those other expenses, plus applicable interest as is spelled out in the reimbursement and development agreement, which I typically calculate when I make those distributions. So at this time.
And for your information, when the developer submits expenses to be reimbursed through tax increment financing, they get from the contractor the sworn statements that include a lot of expenses that are not necessarily TIF eligible.
Right.
So we go through those and break down and extract what is TIF eligible, and then we compare that cost against the list of eligible expenses that were approved with a Brownfield plan, which in this case was a few years ago, and also approved by the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, because they approve what's called the Act 381 work plan, which was submitted on behalf of the BRA to the state, to the two state agencies. And then they go through the expenses, the proposed expenses. They approve what they would approve. So then when we get the invoices from the developer and the contractors, then we compare the actual eligible expenses against what was previously approved.
So, for example.
That's why
on
in your spreadsheet, on the left side, on the left column, we saw what was approved, the amount that was approved. And then as we get invoices, we review them, and they take the eligible amount, and we enter it into the spreadsheet.
And just a couple comments on the retaining wall to illustrate
Yes.
T's point. If you look over here where I've got my little hand moving, it shows that on this particular invoice, 9,200 was included, but there was only 1,000 that was deemed to be eligible because part of that was non-retaining wall. And there's another invoice that's like that. The other piece for the retaining wall that has not been submitted yet, and it's a little bit convoluted, it's the city's engineering costs. So when in negotiations with the developer, originally the city was going to design and pay for this retaining wall, and the cost came back quite a bit higher. So the agreement with the developer, as documented in the reimbursement agreement, was that the city would pay for the design of that wall. The developer would pay for the construction of the wall because they could finance it or cash flow it. And then they would get paid back on that portion quicker. But the city also will get paid back on that portion eventually with the engineering stuff. We didn't submit the engineering costs for the wall when we did the infrastructure component that was approved by the board at the last meeting. We only did the water and sewer infrastructure. So we've got to submit those invoices as well. So that'll be coming up on a future meeting, just as an FYI.
The original Brownfield plan included environmental activities to be performed by the developers for both buildings, both the Edgewater and the North Channel. It included some site preparation, like grading and balancing. Again, that was to be done by the developer. And then it included public infrastructure that was to be installed and paid by the city. So the retaining wall was one of the public infrastructure components. But for the reasons that Ed discussed, the city could not do it at the time, didn't have the funds, didn't have timing and so on, so the developer paid for it. And so now we're reimbursing both the city for the engineering and the developer for the construction.
So that's the 383 that was mentioned in the agenda. And then if you go down to this other spreadsheet here, you've got the some of the actual site and building expenses. You've got the removals and demolition, you've got site grading and balancing, preparation of the work plan, which is also eligible. And then you've got some environmental MDEQ, which is surveys and that sort of thing, and then BRA plan, the MDEQ portion. So the total that was submitted for that was 73,000, and the total approved was 44,000. So you can see there's quite a number of these that were only partially eligible. And again, it was based on how they were invoiced and what those invoices contained. There's just some of those costs that were necessary for the project, but weren't approved by either the Michigan Strategic Fund or the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. So they're not eligible for TIF reimbursement.
The Brownfield Act is very specific about what types of expenses are eligible to be reimbursed through tax increments. So,
You sure it wasn't insurance companies that wrote the Brownfield Act? Because the insurance
Actually-
companies pay for very little also.
well, as a matter of fact, because I was involved back in '96 in the development of the act, insurance companies were part of the group that developed the requirements of the act.
Color us.
Yes.
Yeah, I can believe that.
So what we're approving today, keep in mind, the South Washington area Brownfield plan had three major components. It had the public infrastructure pieces, it had the river park, and it had the North Channel. So we haven't seen any of the stuff from North Channel yet.
No.
And that will be forthcoming. That's going to be reviewed by our new consultant
Right.
for a couple of reasons, mainly the timing of it, but also the fact that T is a partner in the North Channel, so we can't have him reviewing his own invoices, obviously. So that's how that will work out once we get a new consultant on board, but that's probably going to be a few months out before we get all that information. And it's up to the developer, obviously, when they submit that as well. So what the agenda item is asking for is approval of the amounts noted plus any applicable interest per the development agreement. And then at that point, it becomes an administrative task where every year that we capture the taxes, we keep track of it in a spreadsheet and we pay it out as those funds are received in.
It will take about 9 years to repay the private developers,
Oh,
and all 30 years to repay the city's
oh, yeah.
eligible cost. The city has, actually, the city is going to have higher cost than what's approved in the Brownfield plan. But if you remember the last meeting we had here, we talked about eventually the Brownfield Authority will have to amend the Brownfield plan to allow for higher TIF capture to pay for the city's increased expenses. The city's expenses went up, the public infrastructure went up substantially since the time that the city engineer came up with the original cost. It went up by good 30% or so because of time and other factors. So sometime in the future, in order to allow for higher capture, still within the 30 years, then the plan, the Brownfield plan and the 381 work plan will have to be amended. We anticipate that there will be more tax capture than what we had estimated back in, 2014? Because at the time we expected to have some tax abatements, which did not happen. And also the value of the two buildings is going to be higher than what we had estimated back then. Therefore, there will be higher taxes, more TIF to use towards paying for public infrastructure.
Makes sense.
So are there any questions on this particular agenda item for the approval of those eligible expenses?
Yes.
Could I have one question? Just, like you say, the contractor submitted 77,000 in that one particular graph, and it was eligible for 44,000? Who received 30,000?
Well, it's not it's not eating it. The developer's already paid all these expenses.
Okay,
And they know they're only gonna get reimbursed for what's eligible.
Right.
So they submitted these invoices knowing that there's eligible costs on there. They weren't expecting all of those
Oh, okay,
necessarily to
okay,
get approved. They
okay.
knew that there were gonna be some things that are excluded.
they don't know what's eligible and what
Well,
isn't.
They generally do, but it may not all be broken out, or they may not take the time to actually say, of this invoice, we want so much. That's kind of our job. And I'll give you an example. For the county Joslyn Cove project, the other brownfield that the county BRA is doing out there, and that was before the city had a brownfield authority. There was a lot of expenses that were submitted there that weren't ruled eligible when the county did their review of that. So that's pretty typical for when those get get
Thank
submitted.
you.
Yeah, it's a requirement that when the developer submits a request for reimbursement, that they provide all of the invoices from the contractors that show
Yeah.
what was expended, what was invoiced, and what was paid. So that's why we get more invoices than what is eligible for reimbursement. And that's what we have to separate.
Yeah.
What's eligible, what isn't.
Uh-huh.
All right, at this time, I will take a motion to approve the eligible expenses and applicable interest for reimbursement for the South Washington Area River Park LLC.
Okay, I'll make that motion, that's where we're at.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
What?
I said I'd second it.
Oh, second it?
Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the request for proposals for the Brownfield consultant. So T did a draft request for proposals, or request for qualifications and cost proposal. I reviewed it, made some changes to it, and we ultimately issued that on October 9th. We direct mailed it to firms that we knew were qualified, and we also posted it on the city's website, and we also use a service called BidNet, which is tailored to governmental things. It's actually the Michigan Intergovernmental Trade Network. But anyway, they have hundreds of vendors in all different fields, actually probably close to 1,000, that sign up to receive requests for proposals and qualifications. And you select the codes that correspond to the industry that they're in. And so there, a lot of people receive this through that. So we got a better response than what we had thought we were gonna get. We ended up getting 7 proposals back. So when I drafted this agenda item, I wasn't sure how many we were gonna get back, and the plan had always been that T and I would review that over the weekend and yesterday, and then a little bit today, and make a recommendation to the board as to who we thought would be the most qualified, and then hopefully have me work with George Saylor to draft a contract, work with the chosen firm to make sure it was acceptable, and then bring it back to this board for final approval at a future meeting. There's been a little bit of a monkey wrench in that because we've had 7 responses. We feel like we need to take another step in there and maybe do some interviews with the firms to make sure we're getting the proper firm, because they're all pretty highly qualified, and it's kind of hard to sort them out. So we also want to take a little bit more time to sift through the proposals. We want to check some references, and we want to have an interview with them, and then make a recommendation back to this board. So that would change the agenda item a little bit.
Can you go to the table?
Yeah, so we got responses from 7 firms and put together a spreadsheet here that basically mirrors what was requested in the request for proposals. There was information requested about the firm itself. There was a lot of information requested about their key personnel with qualifications. There was information about their relevant experience and different projects that they've done. We made some other comments, asked for, value-added services, key differentiators, asked about references, asked about conflicts of interest, made them show their insurance, and then we asked them for a fee proposal that had some pretty specific things as well. So we both reviewed these. T compiled this. populated the information, we've talked through it. And what we're finding is you have qualified firms, and you've got qualified individuals, and you've got a variety of prices. I kind of gave the example that with a few exceptions on here, it's kind of like buying tires. Every major tire vendor, Goodyear and Michelin and Hankook or whatever, is going to be able to sell you a tire that's going to perform, and it's going to take you down the road, and it's not going to skid out, and it's not going to fail prematurely and stuff. And so at that point, there may be some minor differences, but you start to look at cost, and you also start to look at kind of maybe some intangibles, and that's where the interview process comes in. We have internally narrowed it down to 3 firms that we'd like to interview, and we'd like one member from the board. We thought T, myself, and then a member of this board might be a good interview team to kind of keep it manageable, if that's the direction that the board wants to go in. We can let you know the 3 firms that we chose. I don't have them indicated on here, but I'd like T to talk just a little bit more about the specifics of the spreadsheet that was put together to kind of give you a feel for, the complexity of choosing the firm. So go ahead, T.
Yeah, out of the 7 firms, 6 of them meet more than the minimum requirements. All 7 have the capabilities to provide services. What I was looking for was a combination of who's going to provide the best service at a lower cost in a way that through an individual or individuals who will be easily accessible, who would want to spend the time to get to know the city and what the needs of the city are. And that's what made it difficult or challenging to read through those proposals. And Marlene, you looked at them, the one thing is that all of these firms, they don't do just brownfield redevelopment consulting.
No.
They do primarily environmental. Because all of the firms started doing environmental work, like myself, until the mid-1990s, when the brownfield programs came to being. And then because the brownfield programs were designed to help the redevelopment of contaminated properties, the people who were remediating contaminated properties got involved with redevelopment and started using the brownfield programs. And so all of these firms either started doing brownfield consulting work in the mid to late 90s, or they have individuals that came to them from companies that did that work. So looking through the proposals, we had to try to figure out what were the true brownfield experience credentials were above and beyond the other capabilities of the firms. I mean, some of these firms, like firm number 4, is a large civil engineering environmental firm, probably one of the best, if not the best, in the state. However, the brownfield component is just a smaller component of the overall business. So it doesn't mean that in ranking these firms, in evaluating these firms, that they're not good firms. The ranking is based on looking specifically who is going to provide the services to you over the next, 5 years? What are the experience of those people? What projects they have done, and are these projects relevant to what the Brownfield Authority needs? And then, of course, we have to look, do these people have support from their companies? And do they have a second person that in the event something happens with the primary person, they have someone else that's going to continue providing services? And then in looking, we had asked everybody to provide at least 5 samples of projects that they have done that have Brownfield services. And, there is a lot of abbreviations there because I couldn't fit everything into the spaces I had. So where you see BRA means Brownfield services. If you see ENV, means environmental services. And then there is some other things I was looking for. I was looking at their experience in getting funding for projects on behalf of the Brownfield Authority, both from the state, the DEQ, from the EPA, from other sources. I was looking for their experience in dealing with abatements, tax abatements that are usually tied to Brownfield projects, like OPRA, meaning Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, or NEZ, Neighborhood Enterprise Zone. So you see there CRP, that's the state program of grants and loans under the Community Revitalization Program. So anyway, that section then, it was probably the most consuming because we had to look through and see who has done these kinds of projects, how many. Have they done maybe one, or they have done 20? So based, and also then I look at the cost. If you can go down just to the first line of costs. Okay, keep going down, Ed. Okay, up.
Go up to here.
No, go up to the sample, to the dark, to the total.
Yeah.
Up, further up.
This
Okay.
one?
Yeah, I mean, bring it down so that we can just see the sample annual cost.
Oh, okay,
We don't
excuse
need the
me. Yeah.
details. Well, you can leave it at that. So what I did with the cost, we asked the consultants to provide costs for the services. And, having been there, I know that there are a lot of ways to submit costs. It's a lot of apples and oranges. So I was trying to get, if you can go further up. Yeah. I asked the consultants to tell us, for example, if you look on the left column, under pricing, travel fee. All of these firms are going to be coming from somewhere. Traverse City, Grand Rapids, other parts of the state. Well, I want to make sure that we know what the travel cost would be. Because all other things being equal, we want to know what it will cost for a consultant to come from Grand Rapids or from Detroit or from Traverse City, because we don't have anybody in Manistee or in the general, in the county. So I asked them for a lump sum for travel to Manistee for meetings, for these meetings, for any other meetings. So I asked them for a lump sum. I also asked them for a lump sum for preparing and attending Brownfield meetings, like this. It's on the average, the meetings here are hour and a half, and there is about hour and a half to 2.5 hours in preparation, depending on what we are dealing with every month.
And it's interesting that at least these first four firms, and again, they're not in any particular order, that it's $500, they were remarkably consistent on that.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, whereas some of the other costs were more, some were a little less.
But then you can see on the first line that some firms for travel put 0. Well, what that tells me is they're buying the job. You know, they're saying, okay, we're not going to travel, we're not going to charge for travel, but you know that the costs, the travel costs have to come out of somewhere. Okay? So because of that, then I asked them for the lump sum for doing, for the meetings, also a lump sum for doing brownfield plans. I mean, you've seen the brownfield plans we have. We have a format that, that we use that doesn't take very long to put together a brownfield plan, probably in the order of maybe 10 hours. Then there is preparation, gathering of information that goes into the plan in order to come up with the TIF tables, with the eligible activities. Okay? So because of that, the BRA here has an application that the developer has to fill, where all of the information we need to put in the brownfield plan is in the application. So, and we have a fee. You know, we charge $1,500 to start and another $2,000 later. So, because brownfield plans vary substantially from few thousand to maybe 20,000 on very complex projects, you know, we specifically ask them, if you were to use the BRA's process, then what would that cost be? And you know, you can see there is quite a bit of range there. And that range is also related to how many questions they asked. You know, some of the firms call Ed, they call me and said, well, what is this brownfield plan that you're talking about that the authority uses? We send it to them. Others did not. And that's reflected in their costs. You know, they did not take into account that standard. And then we ask for hourly rates for some key people, the people who will do the vast majority of the work, okay? As well as some administrative and some graphics, because every time we do a brownfield plan, the main consultant will spend something in the 20 to 30 hour range to do the plan, but then they need backup. They need typing, they need or administrative services, they need a CAD or a graphics person to do all of the maps and all the other pretty things that go into the plans. So then what I did next, once we compiled the rates, and a couple of those rates I had to estimate them because they didn't provide them to us the way we asked. I estimate them based on the other rates that they provided. So then I said, okay, what would it cost for each of those firms? What would it cost the BRA if that consultant is for a whole year? So I made some assumptions. I said, okay, we have, let's assume we have 6 meetings a year. And then the consultant travels once a month to Manistee. That makes like 18 trips. So I took the trips, multiplied them by the rate they gave for travel. I did the same thing with the brownfield meetings, with the brownfield plans. And this way, and then assume certain number of hours, most likely, that consultants will spend in a year. And these are a little on the high side, because like the last couple of years, we had pretty quiet. It was pretty quiet here, so I didn't even come close to spending any of these. It was more like under 10,000, maybe more like 5, 7. And however, let's assume that there is more activity, and we hope that there will be more activity. Then I want to come up with some numbers, bottom line, where you can compare apples with apples. And that's what the bottom line is for each of these consulting firms. So with that then, looking at the costs, looking at the qualifications that they provided, and a little bit of my knowledge of these firms. I mean, I've dealt with all these firms over the years. So when I saw something that was way off, you know, they claim that they've done something that, you know, I think it's,
Embellishing.
yeah. Then I took that into account. I looked at the proposal closer and extracted the meat. So with that, then there are, keeping in mind costs, qualifications, the key person that will provide the services to you, the experience of the company and that person. I recommend that 5 of these firms are more than meet the requirements of this authority. Then Dave, Ed and I discussed it a little further. We looked at it a little closer, and we thought that firms 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and 4, yeah, are closer to meeting our requirements, both quality, experience, and cost. And those are the ones that we propose that we interview. And by interviewing, I'm talking about the key person who is going to do the majority of the work. Not the firms, not the principals, but the workers, the people who are actually going to do the majority of the work. And there are 3 firms that, you know, we recommend to you that they're interviewed in person. And so initially I thought that the chair and Ed and myself can meet with those people, those individuals, and then give you recommendations at the next meeting. But we can set it up any way you want. If you want to have a couple people from the authority, that would be great. It's up to you, really.
And we're shooting for, even though it's a few weeks out, we're shooting for November 19th for a couple of reasons. One is T's going to be out of town for 2 weeks. I'm going to be deer hunting on the 15th and 16th and, you know, St. Venison Day. And so.
And probably some of the consultants.
And probably some of the consultants. And so we thought the 19th would probably be the best day. It's a Monday.
Monday,
But we've got to see if the board is amenable to progressing this way. We need to get a hold of those firms and see if they can all make it on the 19th.
Yeah, if they can all.
If not, then we might have to do it a little bit later.
Well, the one question that,
Afternoon?
What?
What's that?
Is this be an afternoon on that date?
Well, whoever, I mean, everybody's welcome to come, but we're thinking about a 3-person committee to interview these folks, so we probably do it in the morning.
but I do have a question. I mean, if you look through those proposals, I mean, I look at the proposals from the different perspective, because that's what I do. I know these firms, the people, most of the people. But when you looked at those, what were your thoughts, your impressions? And I don't know how closely you look at those proposals. And it is hard to cut through the,
Marketing clutter.
yeah.
Yeah.
There is, you know, I don't know if you had any thoughts.
And
but,
I'm looking
you know,
at it a little bit different perspective than T. I think their technical capabilities for the person that's actually doing the plans and stuff is important, but I'm also looking at, I was really interested in what projects they've done, and do I foresee Manistee having similar projects or projects of similar complexity? I also want to know that I can call this person for assistance and not be worrying about paying them $400 every time they drive to Manistee. So for me, travel costs, because that's how I and how John Rose prior to me has relied on T, is, you know what, here's a developer, they might be interested in a brownfield. I've met with them and kind of explained the program to them. They'd like to pursue it more. I need you to talk to them because you're our technical expert, right? And so if I'm doing that with these folks, I'm more likely to do that if they're not gonna be charging me $400 to drive up to Manistee and meet with a prospective customer.
And
You know, there's gonna be a
nobody-
balance. The
Yeah.
whole dynamic between the city and the consultant is gonna change a little bit because T had a local presence here, and any of these firms is gonna be more expensive than what we had with T. So we're gonna have to manage that a little bit. So that means the city's gonna have to do a little bit more, or we're gonna have to be a little bit more selective with our projects. You know, if they're not gonna have a bigger impact, we might not even consider them. We may have to change our fee schedule a little bit. Some of those things will evolve, but, so I was kind of looking at it from that perspective. And so I think that's really important for me to have an interview so we can actually see what the person's like face to face and how they communicate and that sort of thing.
Also,
Sure.
because these firms, I mean, they have much bigger overhead than I do anymore. They charge a lot. I mean, you can see the hourly rates. Even those that say $125 an hour, I mean, they're buying it at that. Most of these people, most of the individuals that would be the key individuals, the real rates are about 160 to 180. Because I know I've seen the rates elsewhere. But they're charging less. But still, that's substantially more than what we have available. So one of the things I was looking at is their experience in pursuing and applying for state grants, federal grants, other sources of funding than then that which the BRA then can use to fund some of these activities, rather than paying out of tax dollars. And so I took that into account in evaluating these firms.
And I'm sensitive to that, wearing my city hat now, because the city floated probably close to 30 grand to the BRA when we were first getting started. Not floated, I mean, it was transferred, here's your seed money. That's down to about $15,000 now, because we haven't had the volume of applications coming in. But if, depending on who we select, we're gonna wanna sit down and review our fee schedule and maybe a little bit of our application process so that we're capturing those expenses, you know, at the appropriate level, at the appropriate time, and that maybe revisit our application, which we've talked about doing a little bit to make sure that that's streamlined and that people are actually filling that out. And I'll give you an example. We're working on a current project now where the interested developer has had our basic application for months and is incapable of filling it out to the level of detail that we need because they don't know what they want to do. Well, that can go back and forth for a really long time. We have another project downtown where we've been working with these people for probably close to 2.5 years now. And it's just painfully slow. So that's an expensive process. At some point, they got to start paying. You know, so we're going to probably revisit some of that moving forward because we're going to be incurring more costs and we're not going to have the luxury of
Income.
stringing that out for a long period of time.
Yeah, because quite often, when I meet with property owners downtown or anywhere in the city, I probably spend maybe 15 minutes, half hour talking with them. Well, for me, it doesn't matter because I just drive, 2 miles. But when you have consultant from out of town that has to travel and charge for that, that's why we're sensitive to the fees for travel. And you will notice that one firm, 2 firms, one charges nothing for supposedly, for travel, the other $50. It's, you know, the balloon, you push it here, it will expand over here, so,
But with that said, if they're
But-
charging us more for a brownfield plan,
yeah.
we're not gonna be doing 4 brownfield plans. I don't see that happening. But I know I'm gonna be charged, we're gonna have have the consultant here. So I don't care if it pushes out on an area that we probably aren't gonna
Well-
be using as much of. They might hope, and maybe the firm that's charging nothing for travel but $4,000 for a brownfield plan is planning on being here drumming up business. And if it's the right kind of business, that's a good thing for the city and everybody, because it's getting these properties back into productive use. So maybe that's part of their strategy.
Yeah, well, it definitely is. As a matter of fact, the one that charges nothing for travel somewhere said that they recommend that the BRA has a second or third consultant available in case that they have a conflict of interest, because while they're here, they may get some private work, and then they will have a conflict. So, let's
That was
face
one of
it.
the firms that we said wasn't qualified, so we don't have to worry about them. But I thought that was kind of
Well,
curious.
they're qualified, but they are not
Not-
even close to the others, that, you know. I mean, that's what they want to get more work, so.
So this turned out to be more effort because of the number and quality of responses we received, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But it's gonna stretch the process out some, which is okay, because there's nothing that's, you know, on the front burner now that's needs immediate attention. So how does the board feel about kind of that process that T and I laid out to try to move this ahead and ultimately get a contract with one of these firms?
I agree.
I think
I think it would-
Is there anybody that would want to serve on that committee? I mean, we suggested the chair, but it could be anybody that the board wants.
I'm happy to serve on that.
Okay. And the 19th will work for you, if that works for everybody?
I won't be hunting. I'll
You're not
already get
gonna be
my buck-
hunting?
No, I'll already have my buck by then.
Oh,
That's good. I might too, but mine would probably be a truck buck, not a,
I'm gonna put that in the minutes. that Megan is guaranteed.
Megan Garrett,
I'll be bringing the venison jerky,
that's right, Megan guaranteed jerky for the interview process.
There you go.
tenderloin.
Is everybody okay with notifying the 3 firms? Well, we'll notify the 3 firms.
Right.
But how do you feel about notifying the rest that we will be interviewing someone else? Or do you want to wait until after the interviews?
I'd still say we wait till after interviews.
Wait till after the interviews.
Yeah, because what if one of these has already got something there,
Or change your mind or something, you know.
you know?
That's
I'm gonna be fielding a whole lot of questions from those firms. I'll send out a proactive email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
don't want
guess, I
to
mean,
disturb.
they're gonna, the firms that aren't selected, they're gonna know that we're scheduling interviews and they didn't get scheduled, they're gonna know anyway. So I don't know.
Now, I prefer that you wait until after the interviews to notify the firms.
Sure.
That would be my suggestion.
So I don't think we need any agenda action, Madam Chair, I just think we need a consensus to kind of move that forward and then,
This one?
no. Off the hook.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is staff reports. I don't have a whole lot to add. We have had some interest from, on the building right next to North Channel, at the old Manistee Vocational Auto Building.
Okay, great.
Ed Kriskowitz owns that building, and he's been kind of exploring what to do with it, and it doesn't really know. So he hired a consultant, kind of, who called me, not really wondering kind of what the process was, and I explained it to him, and I had him talk to T. And so I think the ball at this point is back in Ed's court to kind of basically complete the application with the level of detail that we need. So
Okay.
that's gonna play out. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I've talked both with Ed and his consultant for some time. One thing that the application does, the application that we have, created for this Brownfield Authority, is it forces people to look at the details that are necessary to do a project. Looking at the costs, looking at the impact they're going to have, looking at jobs. Are they going to create any jobs? So we don't want to spend time and money on speculative projects. And it may be that initially the projects are speculative, but with the application, if they go through the process, then they can focus better and determine whether that's a real project for them. So we'll see what happens to that. I suspect that in the next month or so, we may get at least a pre-application for that particular property.
Good.
And we haven't heard much from the Music Vault project. I know that they've hired somebody, they're working on stuff, but that's the one that's been going on for a couple of years now.
Easily a couple of years.
So I guess we'll just see where that one actually plays out. And the county Joslyn Cove project, they obviously have put up one building. I know they were having some issues with the state on some of the, I think it was the tax credits, because the first project didn't happen. The state's coming back now and giving them some difficulty. So city sent a letter of support, and county sent a letter of support, and they're trying to work through that. I think until that gets resolved, they're probably not gonna put up any more buildings. But with that said, they've got a development agreement that ties them to a timeline, so they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And that happened a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. So I haven't heard any update on that yet, but we're monitoring that because we clearly want to see, the city wants to see that project completed.
Absolutely.
And so I
The
think,
tax credits were awarded for 10 years, so they had to finish the work within 10 years so they can get the credits. And that started in 2006. So
I think they'll work through that, and
we'll see.
hopefully they can get some more buildings up, because I know that I think they've sold all 4 of the buildings, or all the units that are there.
Correct,
Then had
yeah.
some pre-sales or a lot of interest in some of the other ones they're putting up, so I think they hit the right price point.
Yeah, so what happened there was that those tax credits were only good through 2016, and they had not completed that next building. That's unfortunate, given the way the economy was during that time period. We're also happy to see that project ongoing again.
There was a combination of factors.
Yeah.
The first developer was overestimated what those units can sell for.
Mhm.
And then they couldn't sell them, and then they couldn't build more. So time flew, and the 10 years were over. Meantime, the law changed.
Oh,
Those were
okay.
the all single business tax credits,
Mhm.
which were converted to Michigan business tax credit, which is not longer available. And so by statute, I don't see how they're going to extend the time for the credit. What they will probably do is give them a small grant to make up for that. That's administrative.
Hopefully it will be resolved one way or another, but the state already did give them an extension on the time to capture the
Oh, they
TIF.
did. Okay.
So that was dealt with a couple of years ago before they even got started in the project, so they kind of put one foot in the water. I think they almost need to get the other foot wet. I mean, we'll see
We'll see.
what happens with that.
Okay.
So I don't have anything else to report. Do you have anything else, Steve? All right, next meeting dates. We've set it up so that we don't have to have regularly scheduled meetings. We like to shoot for that first Tuesday in the month. Obviously, this isn't the first Tuesday, but we'll give plenty of notice. I mean, there's no sense in meeting if we don't have anything on the agenda.
Right.
We're obviously, maybe the first Tuesday in December, we should pencil that in because we'll have had the interviews by then. And then, we might have something to act on then.
Or do you want to do it after, like a week or two after the interviews?
That
Well,
would
you
be
got-
about
you
where
got-
that is.
You got Thanksgiving in there,
Yeah.
and then,
That first Tuesday might be, that first Tuesday might be about the right.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
what
I
I'm-
was thinking the week after, the week of the 26th, November 26th.
Thanksgiving, isn't it?
No, Thanksgiving is on the 22nd this year.
Oh, it's early.
Yeah.
My wife said she's absolutely sure.
That's also still
Is it?
deer season, T.
Pardon?
That's also still deer season, just
Yeah.
saying.
I'll
Okay.
have my second one by then.
Confident.
How many you shoot there, girl? There's a limit, you know.
Well, so T is, the
Up and down.
27th is a is the second or is a Tuesday, or the 4th is a Tuesday.
Well, why don't we just do the 4th, and that way we'll bypass all the, whenever everybody,
Yep.
you know, has Thanksgiving, whatever,
Is
22nd
that
or
part of the
25th.
Christmas, current Christmas date?
Could be.
The what?
What?
The sleigh bell?
It's Sleigh Bell Week.
Sleigh
It's the
bell?
6th and the 7th.
So-
Yeah, it's
Okay.
that weekend, yeah.
So with that said, I just want to be clear, I would like, after we interview the three firms, if the committee comes to a consensus as to which one they think is best, I'd like to go ahead and engage in discussions with that firm to get an actual contract that's amenable to both sides that you guys can consider. Is that an okay approach to do, so we don't have to have yet a third meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think. You've already
And
narrowed it to
we've got a
three,
draft, and
then
George,
review
if
the
he's got a
three.
heads up, it's easy to prepare, it's just a matter of, then we can take action on something if that's.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's appropriate.
And that would be a good time to meet, well, no, that's right, they have to approve it first before meeting a new person.
Well, they can be at the meeting and maybe.
We'll see, yeah.
So, all right, so next meeting will be December 4th,
December 4th, yeah.
2:00. Next item is members' discussion. Any discussion? Kip, welcome.
Thank you.
Anything going once, going twice? All right.
And we get a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I'll second.